we didn't want, when we were building this, we didn't want an agency that was full of retired officers. We wanted that a good mix of young officers, and we wanted that experienced officers mixed in. So currently, we have 7 police officers that this is their first job in law enforcement. We hope that they stay with us their entire career. But the way that the police departments are throughout the country today is they're constantly recruiting. So there's people that are recruiting our officers, which I think is a compliment. We welcome it. If any of our officers want to go to another agency and go to a bigger agency, we will help them get there. But I like the fact that they called and they inquire about our officers and we're recruiting them. And then on the flip side, we have 8 officers that we've actually recruited from other agencies as well. So it's kind of gives and takes. When we identify an officer that we try to recruit, so we've taken a couple officers from other departments. And then we have our retired officers. So we really want to mix that in there and keep that balanced. Once we hit 55 officers, once we're fully staffed, that vision and strategy will change. When we're not trying to add 55 officers in a year, which I'm not sure if it's ever been done at any police department, we'll change gears and we'll start recruiting young officers at that point. Once we hit once we're fully staffed, when we're only replacing 2 to 3 to 4 officers a year, that's when we'll start recruiting. And our goal and what we talk about is with 90-some thousand, 100,000 students at JCPS, we hope to identify students that have an interest in law enforcement, and we can assist them along the way. And hopefully as the years go, that's who we recruit, and we fill these vacancies with our own JCPS students to take this police department over at some point. The bullet points up there, there's just a random information. We've recruited officers from all over the city, from other agencies. The age ranges vary, the number of experience varies, but once when you get out there, I think what the schools are starting to find out is our officers are capable of pretty much handling any type of event or issue. Our investigators, they've worked major cases before. Our police officers are trained professionally, and they'll add a lot of value to the school district as we go. The organizational chart. When we talked about reorganizing and restructuring the police department, this is kind of what I had envisioned. It was kind of a flat organizational chart when we took over. We've kind of broken it up into 2 areas of responsibility. Major Harper will head up the patrol side, and that's if you're looking at the chart, that's on the right-hand side. And I'm going to let him get into the sectors and the assignments, but that's your uniformed officers that are assigned to a cluster of schools. There's 4 sergeants. Each sergeant has a number of officers that work for them. We'll get into explaining the 4 sectors that we divided the city up here in a second. They report up to 2 lieutenants, and they report up to Major Harper. That gives us the span of control that we need to, I use the word accountability when I say that. I don't mean it in a negative term, but you're holding your officer accountable to your own procedures and policy. You're holding your officers accountable to make sure that the job they're doing is being completed the way that we want it completed. So that's crucial for us to give us that span of control and put those first line supervisory positions in place, as well as build that pyramid of that chain of command. On the left side is the area of responsibility for Major Chavez. It is the detectives, the DLC, the district security monitors, and a lot of the things that support our officers. So when you're working with a department that has 12 people, the communications is simple. The resources are simple. The training, it's very easy. Once you expand to 55 officers and a total of 70 people, it gets complicated quickly. So her area of responsibility is going to do a lot of the things that you have to have done behind the scenes. And I'll let each one of them get into their own area of responsibility as we continue to go. Major Chavez, you're first.
Good evening. I'm over the administrative division, and that it consists of detectives. We have 2. They work felony cases such as physical assault, staff versus students, student versus staff. They also work large thefts, cases with trends or patterns, and sex offenses. Anything that becomes a more complex investigation, they'll work that. We have an officer dedicated to school threats on social media and intelligence information who works with LMPD and Homeland Security. They also do open records and preservation of evidence and videos in our Kentucky reporting system. We're hoping to expand to 1 detective per sector for continuity. I'm also over the district security monitors. We have 9 of them. They respond to incidents involving schools and take reports during and after school hours, to include burglar alarms. 3 of the district security monitors work closely with our alternative schools because they built a rapport and a relationship with them, and so with the students and staff, so that makes our job a lot more easier. There's a comprehensive review of our procedures that we're conducting. We're reviewing and updating all our existing procedures and creating new ones based upon our priorities of what we consider are the most important and things that we may face first coming up to us and be impacted with. This includes our critical response, active aggressor, use of force, sexting, juvenile arrest, firearms, bomb threats, and missing persons, among others. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We're getting feedback from Jonathan Lowe. He will be presenting before the Board Policy Committee on the policies and procedures we've implemented and the ones that we plan to do in the future. I have supervision over our fleet and equipment, and due to the rapid and extensive growth of our agency, we went from 2 officers to, we're going to 55 officers. So with that, we have to keep up with our equipment and our needs. So we have, our fleet must be managed, which are purchasing, inventory, maintenance, and inspections. Also, we are purchasing guns, body cameras, computers, cell phone, uniforms, and radios. All of these equipments will be given to each of our officers. So we know we have a lot ahead of us to work on. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and get into the 4-sector system. I want to first start out by saying it has been amazing to me, having watched over the past 4 years since Chief Kessinger's came in. I handed him what we call a police lineup of officers that were assigned to the JCPS Police Department. I think there were about 50 vacancies. There were about 8 people total, counting me on that. And to look at it now, when I look at it every day, to see it quickly getting filled up with the experience with the new officers that are in this room here, it's been quite impressive. We had originally set it up 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, with 3 sectors, but Jefferson County is so big, and it kind of just divided that, obviously, that pie into 3 sections. It wasn't doing us much good, quite honestly, because of the response time, because officers were responding. If you can picture going from PRP all the way to Eastern High School, for example, that's a long distance to travel. So the chief directed me and said, hey, let's work on this and get this set up in a more efficient and responsive way. So we broke it down into a 4-sector system. And if you'll go to the next slide, it'll somewhat explain. We've assigned them to geographical areas. So an officer may have Eastern High School, for example, and he'll have 2 or 3 elementary schools assigned to him under Eastern High School in that geographical area. And that was our goal. Our goal was and it's no offense to other police departments, we don't want to rely on them to respond to our schools. We should be more as efficient as possible in responding to our own schools and handling what's going on inside those schools. Those officers may be strangers to that school, not know who the staff or faculty are in those schools. So this better enhanced our ability with those officers, because now those school principals, faculty, and administrators will recognize that officer's face when he walks in the door. That student may recognize that officer's face if he has to respond to that school. But what we did was we broke it down into the 4 sectors. As I said, each officer has a primary, high, or middle school and a handful of elementary schools. We try to divide those out, looking at the geography of each area in each 4 sectors. The officers support the school staff at all weapons detection systems in a support role every morning. And as of right now, we have 29 high schools that have the weapons detection systems, and 23 middle schools are slated. And each officer will spend their first 2 hours of their duty day starting out at each of those weapons detection systems at those schools, and then they will leave that school and patrol that school and the elementary schools around that primary school. It makes it more efficient for us, It makes it us less reliant on outside law enforcement having to respond to our schools, and we have a quicker response time. The chief's goal has been to get us down in our response times, and we saw that toward the end of the school year, this past school year, how better facilitated our officers were in responding to our schools. So it has worked, and it has been quite efficient.
With that said, I am also over the District Operations Center, better known as the DOC. We have a new civilian supervisor, Sherry Masden. We have fully staffed with 8 dispatchers. The DOC is staffed 24/7, 365 days a year. It's used as a single point of contact for all JCPS departments and employees, including parents and students, not only for our police department, but for our maintenance, transportation, et cetera, different issues that may come from the outside calls. It coordinates with outside agencies for all emergency and non-emergency situations. The DOC also researches innovative technology to integrate into existing systems and assist in quicker communications and response. What we found when we came in is what was working for a few officers will not work effectively or as effectively for a larger number of officers. Not only are we dispatching for other agencies or other units within JCPS, but we're dispatching for officers. So we're looking for technology to assist us in that. We're also implementing information for our computer-aided dispatch system on new sector system, as Major Harper discussed, BEATS. We also conducted mapping of schools. We gave each of our officers maps to go and look at each of our schools to see what exits are there, what AEDs, where they are located, different issues such as when you're going to an exit, what's surrounding that exit outside. So they're mapping each school just in case we need to have a critical response or to assist our officers and staff in the schools. We are purchasing updated software and equipment, and we're collaborating to integrate both audio enhancement and the evolved technology for even a quicker and more efficient response. What I found with our DOC updates is we're providing a better customer service and safety for all our officers and for our staff. We've adjusted our work hours and defined our dispatcher roles and responsibilities, so that helps them do their job more efficiently. We've established written protocols to ensure consistency across the board. And last but not least, our proactive collaboration with district departments is driving technical improvements and paving the way for more innovative and efficient workflow.
On training, we pride ourselves on the training we've already conducted and we've already had, but the future training that we intend on having going forward. As the chief pointed out, we have several retired officers, so they've had thousands of hours, believe it or not, in law enforcement training. Integrating into the JCPS system, we've enhanced our training. Several instructors are involved in our training within JCPS. Some of the training we've listed up here: implicit bias, active aggressor, police response, active aggressor school response. We have crunch time in the summertime because obviously it's hard for us. We don't want our officers off during the school year, obviously. So we have to try to crunch that time in during the summertime, and we have spent a lot of July crunching the numbers and squeezing in training. Firearms training, for example, we all have to be proficient. We're required by the state to have an annual firearms training. We've spent last Wednesday, tomorrow we have another active aggressor training. We're working with Wagner High School on it. They seem to love it. We're working with the St. Matthews Police Department on that. It's more geared towards our officers, how St. Matthews is going to respond if they need to respond to us, and how we're going to respond in conjunction with them. How are we going to, we need to be on the same sheet of music. We do a lot of trauma-informed care. The Department of Criminal Justice, Kentucky Law Enforcement Council, there's mandated training we have to do every year. We have to have 40 hours of state mandated training every year, which is called an in-service. It's part of our certification process to maintain our certification as a police department in the state. So we have to do that every year. Part of our first 3 years of training, obviously, is SRO training 1, 2, and 3. Several of us have completed SRO 2. The chief actually, in less than a year, has caught up with me on all that training that we have had to be done. I don't think he's particularly liked it a little bit because it's about 120, 160 hours so far, but it's been intense trying to keep him dedicated to the job, plus catching up with SRO2. We have several that are slated for SRO1 training later on this year. We don't want to send them away. Luckily for us, SRO1 training is online this year, so we don't have to send them away. We can keep them at work in our schools and then let them finish out their duty day, so to speak, finishing up that training. It's 40 hours. It's pretty intense. So we do that. We have our own district mandated training that we conduct every year, bullying prevention, de-escalation training, restorative justice. And to close with that, I mean, we believe that training is, the more we train and the more we integrate the training that we need for JCPS into our officers, the better we will be able to serve them, our JCPS community going forward.
One of the highlights from this year was once we were up and had plenty of staff, we were able, at the request of Dr. DeFerrari, she wanted us to get with the high school principals and try to take some of their workload and stress off of their plate and to take over some security detail for the graduations. The way that this previously worked, each school would look for their own security. There would be multiple graduations going on. At the fairgrounds, we had multiple security officers coming and going. And for the continuity of safety and security procedures, we were able to step in, and we provided all graduations with all JCPS officers, which was efficient. And I think it was an improvement over previous years. Next year, I think will be much better. We'll have time to collaborate with the school safety administrators and the principals. We were able to debrief some of the graduations we had this year. We had a meeting, so there's certain things that we can do to improve that. But it was a success this year, and we'll continue that into the future going into next year. I know that Major Harper touched on the weapons detections. Currently, we have 29. We were able to staff all of those schools with JCPS officers. And just so you understand the process of how that works, when we put our officers at that school, we're following best practices from Evolve that makes the equipment, and we'll have an officer there. They do not participate in the process of, they don't operate the machines. They don't participate in any of the searching. They're there only if a weapon's found. So for the most part, there's very little interaction with our officers through that process. I do want to thank all of you for adding the extra resources and officers as we continue into this year. Dr. Marshall has he keeps us informed, and he organizes it and puts the process in place so that we know going into next year that we're going to go live at some middle schools in August, and hopefully before winter break, all middle schools will have weapons detections. And we're working with Dr. Marshall to make sure that we hire officers accordingly, that they're available when that happens, and we'll be able to cover all 53 locations with our own JCPS officers. Then an update on the SSO policy and procedures. We're revising some of the policies based off of the reporting frequency from 3 days to a month. It's timely issues. It's a timely issue to get the report in and get it reviewed. And then with the meetings on the internal data review team, Dr. Dawson is heading that up. That team meets monthly. We started meeting in the spring to review the data from our internal data review team. That information is based off the incident reporting form that I'll get to. And then our community data review team, Dr. Marshall heads that up. We've met twice. So those teams are in place. The systems are in place. We started with an incident reporting form last year, and we kind of piloted it out to look at it and see how it was working. There was a couple things that we had to adjust on the user end to make it a little more what we needed and for our officers to use and make sure that we were collecting the data that we wanted to collect. But we have all those systems in place, and going in, that form will be ready on the first day of school, and then those teams will meet on schedule throughout the next school year. And then with the other thing with the implement of the student voice component, we're working on that. There are some issues, the way that the policy is written. our officers aren't in the schools, so there's not a lot of contact with the students. So it's really kind of hard to collect that data from a elementary school student if they've never met one of our JCPS police officers. Now, there could be some interactions with police at school if something were to happen and another agency, St. Matthews, J-Town, or LMPD responded to the school or close to the school. So it's really kind of hard to determine, if those students, if they've had any interaction with the JCPS police or if it's another agency. So we're working on that. We'll work through the complexity of that and we'll come up with some way to incorporate that data into the plan, and we're trying to streamline. I think that's all we have, unless anybody has any questions.
I'd just like to finish up. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation, and to all the officers that are here today, we appreciate your work. I know there's probably some out in the hallway as well. I just wanted to recognize this board. In 2017-18, we started this conversation about creating our own police department based upon what other large school districts were doing. It's not often you get to, it comes to fruition, the exact vision of which we were talking about in 17-18. In 2019, when this board decided to end the contracts with external police departments, at the year before we had 28 SROs. So there were 28 schools who had an SRO. LMPD, because of shortage of officers, we're going to eliminate 20 of them. So really that vote was about eliminating 8 officers. So 8 schools were going to be impacted. Because this board and a team and Dr. DeFerrari put this process in place, we now have 155 schools that have access to our officers. They work for us. They're trained by us. You saw the list of training, and the communication and everything has just been fantastic. So I believe as a result of this, the creation of this department and the decision of this board, our students and faculty and families are a lot safer as a result. And, you can never say it's foolproof. Obviously, things happen. But I do believe as a result of this move, we have much greater safety in all of our schools and not just a few. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Polio, and thank you all for this tremendous presentation. I am just astounded by the growth of this department, and so we really appreciate your work and your diligence in making this vision come to fruition. We'll start with Ms. Duncan.
Well, of all the things, I've been on this board for 18 years, and I can tell you, this development is the thing I'm the proudest of. I was an assistant principal, high school assistant principal, and I've said this before, every day I prayed to have an officer available because I had to deal with things that I knew I shouldn't be dealing with, but we didn't have them. And so for me, it was personal. I knew the challenge our assistant principals face every day. And this is like a miracle to me. So I appreciate so much that, combined with our weapons detection system. I mean, I just hold this department responsible for the fact that we had, I think, 100 fewer weapons reported this year, and 11 handguns and 20 compared to 26 before we had our weapons detection system in, and we just didn't get them in until January. So it's been a huge plus for us. Even one of the things I've noticed too, I try and keep up with, is the number of calls to schools, and I think we're about half the calls to schools now that we were before with the growth of this department. And I watch for the arrest. It's kind of a ratio of arrest to call ratio that I kind of look at. And just looking at the straight numbers that I have, we're at about 13% for every call to school. All those calls to school, about 13% result in a student being arrested. So it's not that every call demands that a student be arrested. And I think the public needs to be aware of that. Response time is hugely important to me. And I appreciate the fact that we have broken this into 4 districts or 4 divisions so that that can increase that response time. Do you have an idea right now of what our response time is presently for getting to schools whenever they call for help?
Well, we'll have that data better to present after this year goes, once we have everybody in place in the sectors. When I first got here, the complaints were that there was a 45-minute to an hour and a half response on a lot of things, and we've seen that from time to time. So I don't think, offhand, I think we're averaging, a 10 to 15-minute response time, but that's before the sectors are in place, and that's when you had officers that were going all over the city. So that should greatly improve. And I think that if you ask us that question after the winter break, that we would be able to give you an exact answer and it'll be a much improved answer, but it'll be way more accurate once we're able to review it and watch.
Well, I know it's getting better and better, and that's what I appreciate. As far as equipment, is there anything that we need to know that you need that would help you do your job better?
No, Dr. Polio and Dr. DeFerrari have supported us 100%. And now it's a slow process because of the way the resources are available out in the world. So when we order stuff, whether it's vehicles or other equipment, there's a wait, vest and stuff like that. There's a wait. But from our end, we've had nothing but support, and we're in a really good spot right now.
Very good. What about training? We tacked 100 hours of training on, it was 40 plus 60. Is that too much, or are we getting it all in, or are we comfortable with that?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than we're used to. But it's not just the district mandated training. The state training has increased a lot as well. So, like Jimmy said, our officers have to take SRO 1 and 2 and 3. They have to take their annual in-service. Now, with the breaks in the school year, it gives us an opportunity to do the district mandated training. And we've done, I think, a really good job of staying organized. But as it goes and as we grow it, it's a lot, but it's not unmanageable.
Well, that's what I want to know. If we've done something that's too much, just be sure and communicate. If there's another way to do that, consolidate that a little bit, I certainly would support that. As far as opening of school, is there a plan? Are you going to be doing anything different for the opening of school this year, or just as usual as we finish the year?
Well, we'll keep everybody. It'll be a long day for everybody. We'll be here to support the schools. Something that we saw last year, where the typical things that happen: students get on the wrong bus, students not getting off the right bus. So we've been training our officers, and we're coming up with a procedure that they'll be ready to respond to those types of incidents. And we're there to support whatever needs the district needs. So we'll have our people available. There's certain things that I saw and that we've talked about that we will be prepared for. But other than that, we'll be available to use however anybody needs.
Very good. Well, I want to thank Dr. DeFerrari for her vision. Also, she saw what other districts were doing, and it helped feed her vision. And I'm just thrilled to see something like Dr. Polio, to see something come to fruition like this, and appreciate all the work that it takes to do that. Thank you so much for your leadership, Todd. And, if there's anything that we need to do to help make this better, please let us know. And, I just appreciate so much. It's the deterrent factor that you provide that I think really is feeding our drops in discipline issues that we have had in our schools. I mean, people probably don't even recognize that, but we have had some drops in our discipline issues. And I do think the deterrence is the key for us. And if we can get all of this stuff reduced, you have done a tremendous job for us. So thank you so much, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Dr. Cole?
Thanks. Yeah, to echo some of what Dr. Polio said, I think it's the board, I feel like pretty specific in the vision that we had and very detailed. And I think that Dr. DeFerrari and in turn, you guys have been, it seems to be very diligent in trying to hew as closely as possible to that vision. So I think it's a really strong example of how this process, this whole board process could work and should work. And like Board Member Duncan, I'm really grateful that everybody's been working so hard to do so, even though it is a lot, and we recognize that it's a lot. Just a few quick questions I have are that you said you expect to hire about 8 to 10 out of the 42 you currently have. Is that percentage like around 20%? Is that about where you've been at with hiring, that you find that about 20% of candidates are fit for the job
I'm not sure what the
or
percentage-
suited? Yeah.
what the percentage is overall. We've had various number of applicants. We could have hired 55 at this point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, clearly.
we do various things when we screen our candidates, and there's certain personalities and
Yeah.
certain types of people that we're looking for. So we don't want to get in a situation where we have to have it completed today. We all made the agreement and commitment that we were willing, the commanding officers were willing to cover school or ride the street until we select the right 55 people.
Great.
So it's a good position to be
Yeah.
in. And we have a ton of interest, and it really, once it started snowballing, once officers started working here and word got out that it kind of turned into a situation where we have people seeking us out. So
Good.
it's right now the system is working for us.
Good. I mean, that's very reassuring. Like I was, and a lot of that's been alleviated, but I was very nervous about how this was going to go. And I think that taking that approach has really helped to mitigate a lot of the anxieties that I've had anyway about this initiative. The only other question I have is there are many different law enforcement agencies throughout the county. Some, of course, are very tiny. Some, like J-Town, are fairly large. So when you do coordinate, you mentioned St. Matthews. When we do coordinate with external agencies, is there a clear, if something bad happens at a school, or we think something bad might be happening at a school, is the structure of command clear, like where JCPS law enforcement is in charge, like other agencies might be there to assist, but they know that we're in charge, and our people know that they're supposed to take charge?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And that's conversations that we've had, and that's why we do the joint training to get that on the front end, so that people know that, especially when some of the things that we face. I've walked into schools, and sometimes teachers, some of the random teachers that I speak to aren't even aware that we have our own police department. So it's something that we have to get out. We have to do that on the front end, and same thing with local police agencies. Like, we have to make sure that they know that what we're building and what we're doing, and that. And luckily for us, you have the personal relationship where most of our officers are from Louisville and agencies around here. So the word's gotten out, and that we would take control of anything that happened on JCPS property
Great.
if it were to occur.
Great. Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate your diligent work, and keep it up. Thank you.
I, as a new board member, am very impressed with this. You answered a lot of the questions that I was going to ask you, such as, especially in the recruiting from other agencies, are we making sure that we're hiring officers that didn't have disciplinary issues with the other agencies that they're leaving? I'm especially impressed with the training, especially the trauma care, because we know that a lot of kids, especially in the district that I represent, are traumatized, and they have a lot of trauma that they experienced. And so I'm especially impressed with the fact that you are giving and offering trauma, and I forget what it's called exactly, but the trauma training. And then when I look at how the officers are covering the geographical assignment, I appreciate that it looks like it's going to be proportionate to the number of schools because Sector 1 is pretty densely populated. And again, most of those schools are in the district that I represent. So as a newcomer to all of this, I especially appreciate what I'm seeing because were exactly the questions I had. How do the officers interact with the students? Are we hiring officers with disciplinary issues from other agencies, and what kind of training will they have? So I especially appreciate this effort.
Thank you all. Just very quick questions, and maybe Dr. D. Ferrari can help if you don't have the answers off the top of your head. With respect to the weapons detection component, and I want everybody in the back to pay attention to this, please. How many guns were found in JCPS schools at the end of the 23 school year, 2022, 2023 school year?
It was 28.
How many guns were found in JCPS schools at the end of the 24 school year?
It was 9 during the day and then 1 for an extracurricular activity.
So we went from 28 to 10 in a total of 1 year. That's due to your work and the implementation of the weapons detection system and everything else that we've done together on these policies. Thank you all for everything that you've done, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I'll speak for myself. I feel vindicated because we took a lot of heat in 2019 when this board made the decision that it made and we embarked upon this work. And so it means a lot to me to see this department fully implemented and developing in the way that it has. I am grateful that you've taken seriously this board's desire to not only have the best measures of security for our students and staff, but to also have the best training that ensures that our students are treated as human beings and not suspects. And so I, as a parent, feel comfortable and confident with the adults that my children encounter in public schools, and a part of that is due to your work. So I want to say thank you. And to Major Chavis, welcome to JCPS. We're glad to have you. To Major Harper, welcome. We're glad to have you in JCPS, and we look forward to how you will further unfold this work and make our building safer and increase our students' sense of belonging. So thank you. Oh, okay. Ms. McIntosh is here. Do you have any questions, Ms. McIntosh?
Yes, just a few. Thank you all for your presentation, and I apologize. I got tied up at work and caught on I-64. So apologies for logging in a few minutes late, and if you had already addressed this. Just a couple of very quick things. I think someone alluded to this a little while ago when you mentioned that you're not in the schools on a regular basis. And I know that a lot of that has to do with the limits that the board placed on the role of the officers. So have there been times where the lack of access to the buildings or not being present has impeded the work of our officers, or that schools have commented that they would be better served if our officers were allowed in our buildings regularly?
I don't have any examples that would suggest that. I know that we're not the only school district where, and I wouldn't use the word not allowed in the buildings, like our officers, they visit the schools whenever they need to, if they're called to the district, but they also have to cover elementary schools. So when you have the number of schools that we have versus the number of officers that we have, you have to have that freedom to go out and patrol. And if you had an officer just assigned inside a school, then you're either going to have to hire another 100 officers, or you're going to have schools that don't have coverage. So I haven't seen anything yet that would suggest anything negative. We're making it work, and so far it's worked pretty well.
Okay, that's wonderful. As far as our numbers growing, that's fantastic. and if you mentioned this at the beginning, I apologize, but can you comment on the retention of officers from last year to this year?
Yeah, we've not had anyone leave. I mean, obviously that's, I'm sure that at some point somebody will, but we're not worried about it. I think that as long, pay-wise, we're competitive. There's other jobs that pay more, obviously, in Louisville, but pay-wise, we're competitive. We're providing, I think, a really good command structure. We're providing a really good job. So we're doing a lot of things that make this job desirable. So if someone did have a better opportunity and then they left, we would certainly help them get to wherever they needed to go. But as far as keeping positions filled, and again, I just looked at the applicant pool today for our most recent posting, so I don't have any concerns about maintaining the staffing levels.
Okay, all good news. And then apologies if I use the wrong terminology for these questions. But as far as being able to communicate with other emergency response personnel from other, whether it's other police departments or fire, EMS, are you able to do that? I think, are there mutual aid channels? I think something like that where you all are able to communicate when needed?
We use the same radio that Metro Safe and LMPD uses, so we can change channels and have conversations with other agencies. And that's also what the DLC does. The DLC will relay information from Metro Safe or a different agency. So we communicate with other agencies pretty regularly.
And so you're able to go onto one of those secure channels where the general public just hears the beeps in the event of a major incident where we're concerned about safety?
Yeah, it's a mutual aid channel, and we have access to it.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Thank you, Ms. McIntosh, and thank you all for being with us tonight in this wonderful presentation. Have a good evening. Next up is our update on transportation and the first day of school. Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Dr. Scholl and board members. We will now bring you a update on first day transportation specifically. I will say this, that all of our leadership and teams across the district have been working hard on first day, feeling more prepared than we have at any time before. And so we're excited about the first day. Still a lot of work to go. We've done a lot more work earlier than we would have before with our new systems in place, many recommended by Prismatic. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Folk, who will give us an update on that transportation.
Good evening, Board of Education. With me is our Transportation Executive Administrator, Marcus Dobbs, and our CFO, Eddie Muntins. Okay. All right, to begin, as of today, we have 561 drivers on roster with 510 routes for the beginning of the school year. As I'll remind you, our average absence rate puts us at about 51 drivers out of that 561. So we are very close to covering our routes for the first day of school. Our mirroring percentage is at 65%. We had initially said that the mirroring percentage would be in the neighborhood of the 20 to 30%. So once again, I do want to give a lot of credit to our routing team and thank you again for the approval of the addition of the routing team. It's paying dividends. We are still concerned about 8/1, our retirements for the year. That is our highest retirement date historically. So as we get closer to that, we'll continue to monitor it. Our TARC partnership. Today, we had a pop-up event with the Kentucky Department of Transportation and the Kentucky State Police, and I want to give them a lot of credit and thanks for their work. It was a very good evidence of intergovernmental collaboration. One of the big things that has to happen with our TARC drivers that do not have the S endorsement, they have to get the S endorsement. The first portion of the S endorsement is the written test, which is typically done at the local driver's license bureau. If you have tried to schedule a driver's license test recently, you know that this is a 3 to 4 week wait in most places. We call Kentucky State Police, Captain Baker and their division that handles this was a great partner, and we worked to strategize to figure out a way that we could get our TARC drivers the written test as soon as possible. So they went to the Kentucky Department of Transportation, who actually administers the test. KSP oversees it, and they came to us today and tested our TARC drivers that did not have the S endorsement. Once they have the S endorsement permit, by statute, they have 14 days that they hold the S endorsement. After the 14 days, they can then road test. Kentucky State Police, because TARC drivers are contracted employees for the district, we can't test them. We can only test our employees. Kentucky State Police will come back and test them for us on site. So once again, a big thank you, and I said this publicly today in a press conference and as many times as possible, to the Kentucky State Police and the Kentucky Department of Transportation, who've been great partners in this process.
I will jump in here because I wanted to add, I know the question is what if we, so right now with the 12 TARC drivers with the S license, that's the school license to be able to drive kids on a school bus. Clearly that doesn't get us where we can change just the 12 or add routes. But as these 58, which we're confident a significant number, and hopefully all of them will pass the S license training and have that done in the next 2 weeks. Clearly, that makes it difficult to add back at the first day of school, so we will not be doing that. But once again, as I said at our last meeting, I think it's important to note, first and foremost, we would like to request when we know that the vast majority of these 58 drivers are now going to be working for us, to bring you back a recommendation in the next 7 to 10 days to add routes back, specifically for high school and middle school at the first bell time, which we know is that 7:30 bell time, focusing on free and reduced lunch students. So a little different than what we talked about before. So we would focus on free and reduced lunch students at Mayo, Manual, and Butler. Those would be schools that we would focus on free and reduced, adding back. And then also all students at Johnson Traditional Middle School. So our middle and highs that you already know that we have Central and Western that have been added. We would be adding free and reduced lunch for Mayo, Manual, Butler, and then for all students at Johnson because of the elevated number of free and reduced lunch students at those schools. We can do 2 elementary schools that would not go through depots. Once again, we don't have depots at the 8:40 and 9:40 start time, but we can add back direct runs to both Coleridge Taylor Elementary and Young Elementary schools. So as we begin to work through this, once again, our focus right now is clearly on transportation on that first day of school. Before school starts, we want to notify kids at these schools. I'll say it once again that we will be focusing on free and reduced lunch at Mayo, Manual, and Butler, and then all students at Johnson Traditional, Coleridge Taylor, and Young Elementary, which would bring a significant number of our students, and specifically our free and reduced students, back into the fold of transportation. But once again, we have to make sure we can't do that with, right now we are at exactly, as Dr. Folk said, the exact number of drivers with the exact number of routes, and we are still training some, so that could increase outside of the TARC drivers. So 12 would not get that. Our key is to make sure that we have the 58 that pass that S training. Then we will bring this recommendation back to you as soon as possible, with hopefully a start time for this transportation in the neighborhood of early September.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Bus Teller is live now. It's active, and essentially what this is a tool for parents to see the closest safe stop. The stop that's populated to Bus Teller is a stop that has been routed directly by the routing team. At that point, we can assure that it's a safe stop, that it meets the criteria for a safe stop. 485 Ride, we opened on Monday. It's been open, will be open from Monday through Friday for the next couple of weeks through the first weeks of school. In the first 2 days, we fielded just over 1,000 calls, with 84% of them resolved on the phone. The rest of them then go into a queue to work by whatever team it may be. If it's a routing issue, or if it's a student assignment issue, or another department's issue, they go in queue with a feedback loop to the family or parent that is called. One thing that I do want to stress, to those that may be watching this evening and the subsequent reports, families need to check Bus Teller daily for updates. And I would check the day before school. This is not a change from the past. You always want to check the day before school to see if there's been a timing adjustment or change on Bus Teller as we balance routes, balance buses, balance all the loads across schools. And you may see on there at some point like pickup time of midnight. That's a placeholder for our routing team, meaning it's next in queue as we route it. So it's not actually a midnight pickup. That's just a placeholder that goes live to Bus Teller, and then our routers get through and put the appropriate time. And then all families through communications will receive Bus Teller postcards and communication.
I would like to add to that as well. As you all know, we have implemented a pause period. That pause period means not adding stops, additional stops. So one of the major areas, as you know, that we were unsuccessful with or caused a lot of our failures at the start of last year was between the routes coming out and the first day of school, we added thousands of bus stops. And what that did was clearly frustrate bus drivers as stops were added on a continuous basis. So as of the 22nd, anyone who is entering that TV, that transportation verification, we will ensure stops, but we will not continuously add stops. And as a matter of fact, it is now in our contract with the Teamsters that there has to be 48 hours notice before a stop can be added, because it was a frustration for bus drivers. So I just did want to explain that pause period. That doesn't mean we won't be adding kids to existing stops. We just won't be adding stops after we enter in all the ones that the transportation team has at this point.
Yeah, and I think one thing to expound on Dr. Polio's point that is critical to understand is not only we do not add new stops after the 22nd until after the first day of school, and the routing team then will assess where new stops need to go to those that are in the queue. But our drivers came back yesterday on a voluntary basis and have this entire week where they can come in, be paid, and they run the routes that they bid on the previous week. Those are their bid routes. They run the routes as many times as they want. They have a feedback loop to give to their compound coordinator. You know, is it timed correctly? Do the stops make sense? Is this doable, et cetera? We then act on that feedback, and we'll have a full scrimmage on the 1st of August, subsequent scrimmage on the 2nd of August, and then a subsequent scrimmage on the 7th of August. So there are multiple points where we have an opportunity to be able to quality check routes this year.
And just to clarify, scrimmage means we're running the routes in the morning and the afternoon at the exact. So right now, bus drivers can come in and just practice their routes at any time. The 1st, 2nd, and 7th will be exact replicas of a school day. So schools, the bus drivers will show up to the school personnel will meet them. Just like they would, same thing in the afternoon. They'll go to that first depot run. We'll give time for that to change. And then, but what happens is we now have, after the 2nd, we have feedback opportunities for bus drivers and schools to let us know about their routes before we do this, the 3rd major scrimmage on the 7th. So we do have that feedback loop built in. The good news is what we did last year, well, not last year, the good news for this year, what we did last year was continuously add routes. So our stops, so as bus drivers were practicing their routes, they were not the actual routes that they ran on the first day of school. And that was a major frustration. For our practices on the 1st, 2nd, and 7th, these will be the routes that our bus drivers will be running on the first day of school. So that pause period will support a great deal in making sure we have a successful first day.
In addition to transportation update, obviously parking lot improvements are a part of that. Traffic flow is a concern this year. We've assessed and worked with 25 schools, those that transportation was removed from in the student or in the transportation plan. New signage, restriping, repaving, several different traffic patterns that have been reworked at schools, including several construction projects that are either in process or close to in process. We continually work with Metro government as well for that, which is not outside of our control, outside of the boundaries of the school zone. And we'll continue working on traffic, obviously, up until day one, but past that as well, as we assess and continue to see the areas where we know we need improvement.
As y'all know, we've made assurances to parents whose students are not going to have bus transportation because their student is attending a magnet school, a traditional school or an Academies of Louisville program outside of their resides area. We've made assurances that we would give stipends to try to participate in the extra burden on those parents for transporting their students. So for most families, this will be $5 per day that we'll be paying to those parents or the educational guardians. For free and reduced parents or educational guardians, that will be $10 per day. Now, in order to make sure if a free and reduced child, if their educational guardian wants to get the higher rate, they'll need to complete an educational benefit form, an EBF. They can get a paper version of that at their school's open house or registration day and complete it there. So it's important to remember that that's taxable income to the driver. So the driver will be paid the stipend. It's $5 per day or $10 per day attended for all students who attend that day, for their students who attend that day, and it's taxable income to the driver. So we've kind of had a pilot of this program with early childhood, which we rolled out last fall. And during that pilot, we did hear some feedback that those taxable income payments came in conflict with some other benefits that the parents were receiving, whether it's SNAP or rental supports, those sort of things. So that's an important point that we're trying to get out. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that because the IRS doesn't care what our opinion is. So in looking at the timing of rollout of the transportation stipends, we're going to be sending out an announcement to all parents who have students who would qualify the first week of August. This will give them additional guidance and assurance of what the timing will be. And then we'll have online signups that will be going out the last week of August. So there's a pretty tight implementation period, and this is the earliest we're able to roll that out. And then we'll begin paying parents or educational guardians the week of September 9th, and we'll be doing that by school. So all the signed up parents will receive payment for one school all at once, and then we'll complete that process on September 23rd. So that concludes our presentation. Do you all have any questions?
A couple other points I wanted to make for families. If there are students going to multiple schools, they would be able to receive the stipend for multiple students. If they are going to the same school, if two kids were in the same school, they would only receive that one stipend since it's the same school. I would also like to ask for encouragement from our families. One of the things on the first day of school that becomes challenging is when students don't know their stops, which we will be tagging all students, even high school students this year. That became an issue last year. And when we have young elementary school students who don't have a parent at the bus stop, we then have to take that student somewhere else, which, as you heard, our JCPS Police Department will be helping us with that as well, but we have White Fleet vans and some others. So the more we are able to make sure every student knows their bus stop morning and afternoon, and we know that parents are there to meet especially the young children, will assist us in making sure we get everybody home in a timely fashion. And then I also want to say we talked a lot earlier last year, about 11 months ago, about the lack of technology on our buses. The technology that we have on our buses is now substantial. That include anywhere, I believe, between 4 to 6 cameras. Is that correct, Dr. Folk? 4 to 6 cameras, which allows us to see what's on the bus. But also the student is getting on or off the bus. So an issue we have is a student gets off at their stop. A middle or high school student, a parent might call us and say their student has not gotten home on the first day. And in prior years, we were not able to know whether that student actually got off the bus. We now have the technology to see whether that student got on or off the bus. And it's not just at the bus depots, it's actually at our schools. So our schools can now assist in much greater ways with the technology that we have on our buses. Once again, we'll have Edulog for parents. So if parents want Edulog, we'll have that opportunity for parents so that they can see where their child's bus is. Schools will be using technology called Samsara, which is very precise on where buses are and access to the cameras on the buses. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to take questions or comments that you have.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan?
Well, I'm forever always worrying about our third start time and how we can give anybody hope that we can eventually even get back to our 2 start times, which will get everybody home earlier. With 561 drivers and of course the prospect of a few more being able to be added and 510 routes, it's hard for me to understand why we're still sticking with 3 start times. So just, can you help explain that to me?
So our peak route count currently is 510 on the first tier, 502 on the second tier, and then 488 roughly on the third tier. So you add those 3 together and divide them by 3, and those are our route counts for those 3 time starts. So if we add those together and divide them by 2, we're going to need 700 bus drivers to do it. So that's why it's not possible.
That's why it doesn't make sense to me, though, when we used to do all of this with 750 drivers. We could break it into 2, and we did magnet and traditional and everyone else with 750 drivers. So
it's important to realize that when we did do it with 750 drivers, we were not on time, we were slow, and we didn't have 2 student assignment plans because we are still currently in the midst of 2 student assignment plans with the choice zone changes from a few years ago. That is a large contributing factor to that.
So we can't possibly get back to a 2 start time until we get 700 drivers? Is that right?
Under our current student assignment plan.
Yeah, I think that's something too that we could monitor in the year to come too. If we continue, I don't anticipate us getting back to 700 drivers. That's my opinion on the situation. But if we were to do that, that's something that I think we could bring to the board.
Well, I think with a more attractive plan, which I think this one's more attractive than the other, I have hope that we will be successful in that. You mentioned traffic patterns. We have a traffic control person who's helping to design some things, but you said 25 schools have had some changes. But have you seen plans that other schools have used to in preparation for how to handle the traffic that's going to now be different than what it has been?
We have, and the 25 schools that I'm talking about, our primary focus are on schools that now have an overabundance of car riders where they used to have bus riders and car riders. We prioritize those schools first. That was the most logical thing to do in the limited time this year.
All righty. And on stipends, are we saying we're going to do stipends month by month so that they go a month and then they get
Correct.
credit for that?
That's correct.
And it's based on attendance, making sure that they get.
It's correct. It's a certain number of dollars per day times the days that the student actually is marked for attendance.
I'm really heartened to hear that we're going to do, when parents have to drive kids to 2 different schools, that we can give stipends for both those runs, because I think that the parents will appreciate that. Regionalizing our routes the way we've done. Rob, what do you think, how can we look at that as being more efficient? How will we know it's more efficient for us when we've regionalized these routes, which I think is also a very attractive feature of this plan?
I mean, I'll answer first, and then Marcus, if you want to jump in. One of the things is regionalize them is probably not as efficient. So that's one of the reasons why they weren't regionalized last year, is to try to improve efficiency. But as I think we found, it was one of those things that caused a lot of consternation in bus drivers and probably caused us to lose bus drivers. So keeping the bus drivers and making their job better was, we gave up that efficiency in order to do that. I don't know, Marcus, is that add whatever you want or correct me if you.
Yes, sir. And the only thing I was just going to add is remember the plan that was approved by the board, then that allows for basically 7 of our compounds, 7 of the 13 to be in regional areas. So we're working within those certain constraints that we have.
Well, I was hoping I'm hoping it's going to be more efficient for us so that when those that are on the late start can have the hope of getting buses there on time so that they don't have to wait for buses coming in. And then they can get away earlier than what we did last year. Dr. Polio, are we going to still continue our money available for schools if they do have to stay late, for supervision?
Yes. So we're notifying schools that August 8th through the 16th, we will provide funding for before school and after school supervision. And it may extend and that includes car rider lines. It may extend beyond that. We wanted to take the 8th to the 16th to see what the scenario was. We believe, that it's going to be much more timely than it's been so there will be less need for that, but it will give us the opportunity to then see which schools may need some extra support and extra dollars, and we'll provide that for the schools.
I would just hope that we also think about if we see this becoming an issue with certain schools having to stay late and this falling on our administrators, that we think about how we can do something to go toward their commitment of time. I know we say they're 24-hour employees, but I think they're deserving of a bonus for some of these kinds of commitments that we make them make. So I hope that we can think like that a little later on. But anyway, thank you all so much. I think you've restored some hope for everybody, and we're optimistic that the things are going to go well this year. So thank you very much.
Ms. McIntosh.
Okay, let's see. Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions that have come to me from constituents so that maybe, I'm sure if I'm hearing them, others are hearing them as well. For the online form that needed to be completed, one thing I heard from a few folks was that in cases where the parents do not live together, there was not an option for them to enter 2 addresses to have different stops for their children depending on where the kids were going home on a particular day. Is there a way for them to be able to do that, and how should I communicate that to them?
Yeah, so that is an issue that we found with the TV, and the solution there is essentially one of 2 routes. Either they communicate directly with the school and the school gets in touch with the routing team and we determine where the 2 stops will be for a child that is split between different locations at the end of the day, or they can go directly to 485 RIDE, call 485 RIDE and get placed into the routing queue.
Okay, thanks for that. And then same phone number if they looked today and it wasn't on there, if they didn't have a bus assignment, correct?
Yes. I
phone number?
look up to the first day of school.
Perfect. I think where some of the confusion is coming from possibly, and I personally have not tried it, so I apologize, but a couple of folks said that Bus Finder, I think is what we used to call it, was still live and showing old information. And I think some folks were going to the old site instead of the new site.
Bus Finder was not live on our end. From my understanding, there was an old cached Google link to it. We had turned off Bus Finder from the transportation department some time back. That was out today, which caused a great deal of wasted time for our routing team.
Okay, well, apologies for that. I'm just trying to clear up confusion that I was hearing from folks. So you answered most of my other questions. The only other thing that I would follow up on is if, and I know it's a big if, we are able to restore transportation to Mayo, Manuel, Butler, Johnson, and Coleridge, Taylor, and Young. Just how would we, I don't want to say monitor that, how would we implement that where we have neighborhoods of kids who go to the same school, but some may qualify for free and reduced lunch and transportation and others would not? So in other words, if we assign a bus to a kid who lives at, a certain house number because they have free and reduced lunch qualification, how will we prevent overcrowding on that bus from kids in the same neighborhood who don't qualify from also accessing that bus stop?
What we'd actually end up doing is, because we're students, when they fill out with the TV, the transportation verification form, those students would then be tagged. And so that's our way to make sure that we don't overload those buses, because that's what schools will be told. Students without tags should not be allowed to board the bus. So that way we don't overload them.
And then in the morning, that would almost be like their ticket to get on the bus as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. All of my questions have been answered at this time. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kolb?
Thanks. How many drivers roughly did we have on the first day last year? Do we know? I know it's in the presentations from before, but I forget. That's okay. Did we have more or less? Or the same?
Definitely less
Okay.
than what we had last year.
We have less now than what we had last year?
As I recall, we were in the high 570s, 580 when we
Okay.
started
Okay.
last year. That's not, as I recall, so I don't want to necessarily be quoted on that number, but we definitely have less than we did at this time last year.
Just treading water or getting close to it is pretty good. I know, like, what was it? Cincinnati just cut all bus service for 7th and 8th graders.
All 7th and 8th graders, and
So-
St. Louis just cut about 14,000, I believe.
Yeah, so it's a national issue. So getting to where we are has been a lot of work, and I'm certainly appreciative of it, that we're going to be able to provide transportation to so many. Did you say we usually get lots of retirements on the first?
Historically, our two largest retirement days are 7/1 and 8/1.
Okay, so we're.
July 1st, August 1st, yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of holding our breath for
Yes.
August 1st. So, well, I guess that's good that we'll have a little bit of notice before we think about starting to add things back. And then those, if we are, Dr. Polio, that aspirational plan to add some back if we're able to, was that entirely based on the TARC drivers, or is that assuming other hires as well?
It's entirely based on the TARC drivers.
Okay.
That's the 70 TARC drivers that we committed to, challenged, or asked transportation to bring a plan that 70 bus drivers would make sure that we were able to have without negatively impacting on-time service. And
Yeah.
that's what they brought back.
Okay, yeah, as I said back in April, on-time service is very important to me. So I hope that we prioritize that, and we don't try to do too much too soon. We're cautious with that. Other than that, that's it. Thanks for the hard work, and keep it up. Thanks.
Ms. Strange?
Again, thank you all for the work that you're putting into this. Couple of questions. How will the stops be determined for the schools? And I'm going to be optimistic that will be added back when when we have the total of the 70 drivers from TARC.
We'll need to know who we're routing at that point. We would route them like any other students. We just need to know who we're routing. If the recommendation that Dr. Polio spoke of, if that came, let's say hypothetically came to fruition, then we determine where the students are and then build the routes based off of that.
The Mail, Butler, Manuel, Johnson, Coleridge, Taylor, and Young.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then secondly, which I'm hearing from students, that attend male high school. They're in a tizzy because they don't know where they're going to park or the ones who will be driving. And it's something, they were going to have some kind of special permit or something to park on the school parking lots. Any validity to that, or what are we doing about parking spaces, since we will possibly be gaining a lot of drivers at these high schools?
Yeah, that is the traffic pattern that we're talking about, is
Okay.
where the parking spots are. I can't say specifically at Mayo. I think the vast majority of our schools require parking passes out of students. I would say they probably all do. Now, some have greater challenges on the amount of parking versus the amount of kids that drive, and I would say Mayo is one of those. But we can definitely check into that and make sure that their plan is effective for enough drivers to park at the school.
Yeah, because if we're taking away their transportation and requiring them to drive, if their parents aren't able to take them, where do we expect them to park?
No, we stripe parking lots and add parking spaces. I don't know what Mail does as far as like who.
Well, let's just take Mail off the table, but
Yeah.
any school.
No.
Are we adding additional, do we have capacity?
Yeah, so like at Barrett, for example, we turned all of the bus lanes there into queuing for all of the car riders so that we could stack 70 cars nose to nose, run them through rather than take them off the city street. And they obviously don't have the student driver issue, but for the high school side, then it becomes, where are we going to place high school drivers? Now, I will say this, one concern that we have had, and knowing that there may be a recommendation that comes to add back service for some of the high schools, we're a little bit hesitant to restripe an entire parking lot if we end up adding buses back a month later. So that's, it's a little, that's kind of a little game of brinksmanship on, if we do this, we want to make sure that we're not back restriping the parking lot the next day.
Okay. And then this is really, I think, more of a student assignment plan than a transportation plan, but I've gotten emails from parents who have students who obviously live in the same household and aren't being assigned to the same school. And that has become a real transportation issue.
So if it is their cluster school or their reside school, they have the right to do that. The challenge is, and this district and this board has never done it where there is sibling preference for magnet schools. So that is, something that we talked a lot about in the student assignment committee not many years ago, 2019, 2020, but that has always been kind of a sticking point as to whether we give seats to siblings or not. So an example we hear a lot is Lincoln Elementary, where, but if we did siblings, then somewhere between 60 to 70% of the kindergarten class would be siblings, and there would be no access to other families. So it's a give or take. That's a tough one to decide on, to be honest with you.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Craig?
Just updating my question from the last work session. Do you need anything else from the board today in order to make the first day of school as successful as it can be?
No, sir.
Thank you. Is there the authority that you're going to be seeking? Are we anticipating a special meeting? I'm curious if we might be able to give you the legal authority tonight to add these routes back in order to expedite it and make it as efficient as possible, as compared to having to summon us all back and go through this again.
So what I would prefer to do is to do it before the first day of school so that we can notify kids that, okay, if you have to get transportation the first 3 weeks of school, it is coming, it is coming in September. So our original idea was a special meeting, it's probably sometime around the 6th or 7th of August. But I don't know if that's a legal option or not.
It probably is in theory. However, there's going to be various nuances to the plan that I think the board's probably going to want to ask questions about. So my recommendation would be to have a special meeting.
And so I won't make that motion tonight, but I'm excited to add back as many as we can prudently
Yes.
in order to ensure a successful first day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Folk, for your hard work. I know this has been an incredibly stressful time for you over the last months as we've tried to get to this point, to adding routes and ensure efficiency as well as expanding access for students. And so thank you for hanging in there. Thank you, Dr. Polio, for hanging in there with this effort. We have had many partners throughout the city who have helped us to get to this point. Having the addition of 70 TARC drivers is no small thing. It is helping us to get started on the right foot, and we have great expectations. I, like Ms. Strange, am very optimistic about the possibility of adding more access and transportation for more students in this district. So again, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for this presentation. And may the force be with you on August 8th.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Mr. Craig, seconded by Ms. Duncan. All in favor? Ayes have it.
No, I'm opposed.
Excuse me?
I'm opposed. I'm a no vote.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Duncan is a yes. Ms. Strange is a yes. Mr. Kolb is a yes. Corey Schultz is a yes. What did I say? Oh, Mr. Craig is a yes. Ms. McIntosh is a yes. Dr. Kolb is a no, for the record. Got it. Thank you. Is Mr. Dida still here? Okay. Chief Callahan will now play the video for speakers.
In accordance with Board Policy 01.421, the board expects that persons who have signed up to address the board will limit their remarks to the subjects that they listed at the time they signed up, that their presentation will not include any defamatory or abusive remarks about the subject, and that they will present their remarks in a manner that is consistent with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Also, in accordance with board policy, the board reserves the right to limit, extend, or terminate discussion on any subject. Discussion of personnel matters is not permitted, as state law requires that personnel matters are within the sole authority of the superintendent. The speaker may not initiate charges or complaints against an individual district employee by name or position in order to ensure confidentiality and fairness for the employee. Speakers before the entire board are not allowed to use props, displays, or any other objects during their remarks. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the board and may not share these minutes with any other speaker. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to finish your statement. At the end of 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. The superintendent will look into the speaker's issues and, if necessary, represent the board in following up or recommend action to the board. The full board policy concerning public participation in open meetings is available for viewing on our website and at our sign-in sheet.
Mr. Dida.
Hello, everybody. My topic for today is on transportation due to the crisis that we had last year. And upon hearing everything, I don't know if we're prepared. I don't think we're ready. Everything sounds okay, but if you think about it, bus drivers are going to quit. Some of them are going to leave. Adding extra stops to their routes is going to frustrate them, like they said. So he mentioned something about $10 for a parent to drop off their kids at school. I don't know how that's going to work for a single parent, because you have to think about them. They have to go to work. Single parents have to take care of their kids. They do have benefits that they get from the government. And if you're going to tax them on that $10 that they're getting, and then risk losing the benefit that they're already getting through the government, it's not going to work out. Nobody's going to want to do that. The only solution that I can think of is to bring in outside carriers. I'm a truck driver, by the way, so I do get around. In other cities, they're doing it different. They have outside carriers, and it's working perfectly. if we bring in outside carriers to take care of all the problem, extra stops, because if you think about it, families are going to move, extra stops are going to need to be added on. It's the best option that I can think of. Somebody already presented this idea. I don't know why we didn't move forward with it. And sorry, hold on. Yeah, that's pretty much my proposal, to bring in outside carriers to help out with the bus crisis that we're gonna have. It's gonna happen. So that's really everything I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Duncan, Mr. Craig, all in favor? Ayes have it. Have a good evening.
Are you gonna?
No. Oh, there. Yeah, I forgot about this.
Does anyone want an interview?
We want to interview questions.
Yeah.
We want to
Yeah,
know
so
about
the evaluation's online right now. Hasn't been signed yet. Can't have a copy of the signing yet. That's where
Okay. But it's online.
They'll be busy.
Yeah, he's right there.
Anything you want about anything?
You need me to land your right hand? Should I sit?
Just a quick meeting.
Efficient. Only have one speaker. It changes the time, ending time.
Good. How's everybody?
He's still screwing his light in.
Okay, 2 weeks,
before school starts, how are you feeling just about it?
Right now, I'm feeling good. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, there's no doubt, but we're farther along than we've ever been when it comes to routes and stops, and all of having the internal routing teams helped a lot. So, and obviously learned a lot of lessons from last year the hard way, but taking those lessons from last year and creating better systems for this year is helping us out. So first day is always hard. I mean, when have that many kids who are coming to school and many young kids who have not been on a bus before and, not sure of their stops and things like that. So first day is always hard, but I feel really good about where we are at this point.
The schools you listed that might see transportation restored, did you list those in order of priority? So Mail, Manual, Butler, then Johnson Traditional?
No,
Okay.
there was no priority in that whatsoever. I just
Okay.
listed out the high schools on my paper and then went down to middle. And so all of those at this point are schools that we would like to add back for either free or reduced lunch students, or the Johnson and Young and Coleridge Taylor being all students.
So we're having a pause period for the first time, I think. But it sounds like we are adding stops between, not for anyone that signed up after the 22nd, but we are adding stops to the routes. So will drivers' routes change between now and the first day of school?
So right now, I mean, what we have is the drivers will be our first